I was banned from my sister's wedding. They said I'd ruin the mood, so I packed my silence and flew to Antigua with my fiancé. No drama, no fight, just distance. But while they toasted under chandeliers, the groom's financial empire started to collapse. Secrets surfaced. My name came up in federal files, and I said nothing. Because I had already said no 6 months earlier when no one listened. So when they called me bitter, jealous, unnecessary, they didn't know I was the one holding the missing piece. And I never had to raise my voice. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sunlight pouring through the windows like it always did around mid-morning when Olivia's name lit up my phone. I thought she was sending an update about the bachelorette weekend in Miami. Maybe another Pinterest board or a shoe pole. But the message was brief. Ice cold, surgical. Hey, just a heads up. You're no longer in the bridal party. Julian and I decided to simplify the wedding party. We're keeping things light and positive. Hope you understand. That last line twisted in my chest. Hope you understand. I read it again slower this time. My hands felt suddenly too big, too clumsy to hold the phone. My coffee had gone lukewarm. No call, no conversation, just a heads up. Just 3 weeks ago, she and I had gone to that overpriced boutique in Capitol Hill. I'd watched her twirl in her third Vera Wang dress while I held up my phone to get the best angles for her Instagram stories. 2 months ago, I helped her organize the guest list in Mom's kitchen, trying to remember which cousin got divorced and who needed a vegan plate. I even designed her save the date cards. Now I wasn't even welcome to stand beside her. I didn't know what to say. Or feel. Just hollow. The next thing I did was instinct. I texted back. Got it. Thanks for letting me know. I watched the screen until the word scene appeared. That was the end of it. No apology, no love you anyway. Just silence. I dialed Mom. Straight to voicemail. Then I texted, did Olivia talk to you? 15 minutes passed, then the dots blinked. Finally a reply, yes. She told us last night, we're supporting her decisions, it's her big day. Try to understand, Maddie. There it was again. Try to understand. I wanted to scream. I walked around the apartment in slow, uneven circles. I opened drawers, closed them. Rearranged a stack of mail I'd already sorted. This wasn't just about a dress or a role. This was about being erased. Again. Olivia was the golden child. Always had been. When I got a full ride to University of Washington, they barely looked up from her dance recital. When I moved back to Seattle and got promoted to project manager, Mom asked if I could help Olivia design her wedding website instead. It had always been like this, my achievements, a footnote hers, the headline. But this felt like the final underline. When Daniel walked in that evening, he immediately knew something was wrong. His face tensed the second he saw me on the couch, knees pulled up, arms wrapped around them like a child. Maddie, what happened? I handed him the phone. He read the message, brows pulling together. Are you serious? She cut you out like that? I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. She wants a more positive vibe. Apparently, I don't qualify. He sat down beside me, pulled me into his chest. His warmth wrapped around me like a blanket. I'm so sorry, baby. That's not okay. None of this is okay. I felt the tightness in my throat again, but pushed the tears down. And Mom knew. Dad too. They didn't say anything, not even a warning. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, do you want to go to the wedding number? I mean, do you want to stay here in this? Let them define how you feel, how you spend your time. Or do you want to get away with me? Go somewhere that doesn't know their names. Somewhere peaceful. I blinked, unsure if I heard him right, like a trip, like an escape. He stood up, already pulling out his laptop. Let's see what's out there. Caribbean. Bahamas, St. Lucia. Somewhere with no wedding hashtags, no bridesmaids, just sun and silence. I watched him scroll for a moment, then stood up and walked to the kitchen. Opened the fridge, then shut it again. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just tired. I walked back to him slowly. Can we leave this week? We can leave Friday. I'll make it happen. I nodded. I'm not running away. Number. You're reclaiming your time. Big difference. His voice was so steady, so certain. And in that moment, I realized he saw me. Really saw me. Not as someone's sister. Not as a side character, just Madison. I opened my phone again, stared at Olivia's text. The words still stung, but this time I didn't flinch. I opened a new message. This one to Mom and Dad. Hi. I'll be away for a while. Please respect my space. I need time to rest. I hit send before I could overthink it. Daniel turned to me. There's this private villa on the southern coast of Antigua. Ocean view. No neighbors. You wanted. I smiled. The smallest one, but it was real. Yes. Book it. That night, while he finalized the travel details, I packed a small suitcase. I chose swimsuits over formal wear. Books over makeup kits. Peace over pleasing. Outside the city buzzed and blinked, but inside our apartment I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Stillness. I wasn't going to the wedding. I wasn't going to smile for photos that would crop me out later. I wasn't going to toast to a love that had no room for me. I was going to the Caribbean. With the one person who hadn't once made me feel like a backup plan. And maybe, just maybe, I'd start remembering who I was before I started trying so hard to be what they wanted. Not their maid of honor. Not their problem. Just me. Madison Cole. Leaving the noise behind. At least for now. The morning air was unusually quiet, like even the city knew I needed a break. I sipped coffee on our balcony, watching the mist hang over the rooftops of Portland, softening the outlines of the buildings I'd seen every day for the past 10 years. Something about the silence felt like a pause between lives. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. No Instagram story. No group chat updates. I wasn't interested in being found. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, barefoot, hair still damp from the shower. He was holding his phone, squinting at the screen. I booked the villa. Private, right on the water. They even stock the fridge before you arrive. We fly out Friday early morning. Just 3 days from now. 3 days until white sand replaced pavement and ocean waves drowned out wedding speeches. I nodded and whispered, "Thank you." He smiled softly, then walked over and kissed the top of my head. "Let's pack light. We're not bringing them with us. Just you, me, and silence." I laughed under my breath, the first real sound of ease I'd made in days. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The email cursor blinked in a blank draft for several minutes while I stared out the window at the night sky. To Mom and Dad, subject, "I'll be away. I'm taking some time to rest. Please don't try to call. I'm okay. I just need space right now." That was all. No blame, no long explanations. I read it over twice, then hit send. The silence after was immediate. Peaceful. I opened my closet and began laying out what I'd take. Linen dresses. A wide-brimmed hat. A paperback I'd never gotten around to reading. I packed one pair of heels, then changed my mind and put them back. I was halfway through folding a white sundress when Daniel walked in and held up 2 small bottles of sunscreen with a sheepish grin. "Do we need SPF 50 or SPF obsessed?" I smiled and pointed to both. "We'll need all the armor we can get." The rest of the week passed like a soft blur. I worked from home, finished up 2 final project deadlines, set my out-of-office reply with vague language, and avoided every phone call from extended family. Olivia didn't reach out again. Neither did Mom. Not even a forwarded link to the wedding livestream. By Thursday night, I was done packing. Daniel had made a playlist called Nothing But Blue and loaded it into our phones. He also printed our itinerary complete with notes and circled restaurant names in Antigua. As we zipped the last suitcase, I stood still for a moment, hands resting on the fabric. Are we really doing this? We are. And it's not running away. It's running toward better air. We got to the airport before sunrise. TSA was quiet. Even the Starbucks line was short. I kept waiting to feel guilt, but all I felt was relief. On the plane, Daniel took the window seat and reached for my hand as we taxied. "When was the last time you took a break for yourself?" I tilted my head. "Honestly, college spring break." And even then I was editing my thesis in the hotel room. Then this is overdue. As the plane lifted, I looked down at the faint outline of Portland's skyline fading under a blanket of morning fog. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just stared until the city became a texture instead of a memory. 7 hours and 2 connections later, we landed in Antigua. The air was humid and salty thick in a way that reminded you to breathe slower. A private car waited for us, sent by the villa staff. Daniel took my bag and opened the door like it was second nature. I sank into the leather seat, feeling my shoulders drop as the city traffic gave way to palm trees and coastal breeze. When we arrived at the villa, it was almost sunset. The house sat on a low bluff overlooking the ocean. Modern but quiet. White walls, wood accents, open windows that let in the sound of waves. Inside, everything smelled like citrus and salt water. A bowl of tropical fruit waited on the kitchen island. The bedroom doors opened directly onto a shaded terrace. I walked out and saw the view. Endless blue, broken only by sunlight flickering on the water. No voices, no dresses, no toasts. Just the world as it was, unfiltered. Daniel wrapped his arms around me from behind. This place is for healing, Maddie. Not forgetting, not escaping, just healing. I leaned back into him. The warmth of his chest, the steadiness of his breath, the simple truth of his presence. We spent the first evening barefoot, eating pineapple and grilled fish with our fingers on the terrace. We didn't talk about the wedding. Not once. No mentions of Olivia. No questions about who replaced me as maid of honor. Just laughter and silence. Shared and chosen. Later that night, as I stood under the outdoor shower, I let the water wash over my skin and thought about how pain clings when you try to hold it still. Here it felt like the waves were doing the work for me, carrying it out inch by inch. When I climbed into bed, the sheets smelled like lavender. Daniel was already half asleep, hand resting on the empty pillow beside him. I turned off the lamp and whispered more to myself than to him. This is the first time in a long time I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I meant it. For once, I wasn't an accessory to someone else's spotlight. I wasn't the reliable sister, the overlooked daughter. I was just Madison. And that was finally enough. At least it was here. The morning sun filtered through the gauzy curtains, casting soft gold across the tile floor. I woke to the sound of waves brushing the shoreline like a whisper, steady and patient. The air smelled faintly of hibiscus and salt. For a moment, I just lay there, letting the world stay quiet. Daniel was already on the patio, barefoot, slicing mango and papaya into a bowl. He glanced up when he saw me and smiled, that easy, slow smile he had that said everything was okay even when it wasn't. "Sleep okay?" he asked, as I stepped out, pulling the robe tighter around me. I nodded, then took the bowl and sank into the chair across from him. It's hard to feel broken in a place like this. He reached for my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. You don't have to feel any certain way, Maddie. Just be. That's enough. After breakfast, I unrolled my yoga mat on the wooden deck that faced the ocean. The breeze made the corners flutter and I placed small stones to keep them still. I tried to follow my usual flow, slow breaths in sync with movement. Sun salutations, cat-cow warrior too. But my shoulders felt tighter than usual, my chest heavier. The instructor's voice from the guided session in my earbuds said to focus on stillness, on letting go. I tried. I really tried. But halfway through a seated twist, I felt my throat close. It started as a flicker behind my eyes. Then a tremble in my hands. By the time I folded into child's pose, the tears had already started falling. Hot, silent, and sudden. I pulled the earbuds out and pressed my forehead to the mat. The fabric smelled of sunscreen and salt. I tried to breathe through it, but something cracked open inside. I didn't hear Daniel come up behind me, but I felt his presence before I saw his hand. He knelt beside me and simply held my fingers, not saying a word. I don't know why it still hurts, I finally whispered, my voice barely there. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We stayed like that until the tears ran out. Later we walked barefoot along the shoreline, letting the waves wash over our ankles. The beach stretched endlessly untouched, the sand warm and soft beneath our feet. It should have been perfect. It was perfect. But my mind kept circling a memory I hadn't touched in years. I was 19. A sophomore at UC Santa Cruz. His name was Corey. He was in my econ class, always sat 2 rows ahead. Funny sharp, the kind of guy who made you feel like the only person in the room. He asked me to grab coffee one day, and before long we were spending every weekend wrapped up in each other. It was the first time I let myself fall for someone completely. I told Olivia about him during winter break, how he made me laugh, how he remembered the smallest things about me. She smiled too much when I showed her his photo. I didn't think much of it then. By spring he started pulling away. Shorter texts. Cancelled plans. I chalked it up to finals until I saw the tagged photo on Facebook. Him and Olivia at a concert, her head on his shoulder. The caption read, "New Beginnings." I had stared at that image like it was in another language. When I asked my parents, Mom just sighed and said, "Olivia didn't mean to hurt me. She'd been struggling with loneliness with confidence." Dad added that I should try to understand that Olivia was more sensitive than I was. I was 19 and gutted, and all I got was a lecture on empathy. Now walking through the Caribbean sun, with Daniel's hand in mine, that old sting returned like it never left. The wound had never fully closed. I just stopped looking at it. I stopped in the middle of the sand and stared at the horizon. "She always got away with it," I said, voice flat. Daniel paused beside me. "Who, Olivia?" Corey wasn't the only thing. It's been like that since we were kids. She'd take and I'd be told to understand. To forgive. He let out a breath, looked out toward the water. "That's not forgiveness. That's surrender." I didn't respond because I didn't know how to explain the way love in my family came with conditions. That being the older sister meant being the stronger one, the quieter one. That keeping the peace often meant giving it away. Back at the villa, I curled up in the hammock on the patio. The breeze rocked me gently. I watched a gecko crawl along the white wall, its movements quick and certain. Daniel brought me iced tea and sat on the edge of the hammock, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. "You don't have to protect their version of the story anymore," he said. I closed my eyes. What if they never see me clearly? What if they never wanted to? Then maybe it's time you stop waiting for them to. That night after dinner, we sat on the sand with a blanket wrapped around our shoulders. The stars were so clear it felt like we could reach up and grab one. I leaned into Daniel's side and let the sound of the ocean soften the ache in my chest. Even in paradise, grief finds its way in. But maybe here I could finally stop pretending it didn't exist. Maybe here I could let it burn out gently like the last flicker of a match without anyone demanding I smile through the smoke. The sound of the tide came in slow and steady like a breath that never ran out. I traced circles in the sand beside me with the tip of my finger, letting the grains sift and fall without purpose. Daniel was beside me, legs stretched long in front of him, a driftwood stick in one hand that he idly used to draw lines between seashells. He'd been quiet for a while, more than usual, and that meant something. When he finally spoke, it was like he'd been practicing the words. "I haven't told you everything about Julian." My head turned before I even thought about it. He didn't look at me. He was still watching the waves. "What do you mean?" He tapped the driftwood against a smooth white stone before tossing it back toward the dunes. "A few years ago, right after I left that corporate branding firm in Seattle, I freelanced with a startup called Verva. You probably don't remember the name. It burned out fast. They wanted to build a lifestyle app tied to crypto investing. Very flashy, very vague. Julian Harper was one of their secondary investors." I straightened up. "You worked with him?" "Not directly. I was on the design strategy team. Mostly product visuals and UX mapping. But I was in enough meetings to hear things. Like what he glanced at me then, eyes steady. Like how Julian wasn't as hands-off as he made himself seem. He had influence over key hires, demanded certain language in press kits, and constantly pushed for features that made the app look more like a gambling platform than a financial tool. I let that settle in the air. The name Obsidian Capital echoed in my memory like a warning bell. "Why didn't you ever tell me this?" He sighed, leaning back on his elbows. "At the time, I didn't think it mattered. Verva was a disaster, and I figured Julian was just another overconfident VC. But then after we moved in together, I started hearing more. Little things. Rumors. Quiet conversations at tech events. A designer friend told me Obsidian's audit reports were always late. Another guy said the numbers in their pitch decks never added up. I pulled the blanket tighter around my legs. So you knew. Or at least suspected. He nodded slowly. I didn't have proof. And I didn't want to be the guy who sounded like he was trying to trash your sister's fiancé just because I didn't like the way he talked on CNBC. I looked down at my hands at the thin silver ring on my right middle finger, the one Daniel had given me last Christmas. A quiet circle. No diamonds. No grand gestures. Just steady presence. I told my parents, that something felt wrong about Julian, that the way he talked about money didn't sit right with me. That he was all smoke and shine and buzzwords. They said I was jealous, that I was always trying to compete with Olivia, that I didn't like anyone getting more attention than me. My voice cracked at the end. I didn't mean for it to. Daniel reached for my hand. You weren't jealous, you were aware. I blinked hard, swallowing the knot rising in my throat. Why do they never believe me? Because believing you would mean seeing Olivia as imperfect, and they built too much of their hope on her being flawless. The silence stretched between us. The stars above us didn't care, they just kept shining. I wanted to scream, but there was nowhere for the sound to go. I wanted to ask him why he let me walk into family dinners, wedding planning, calls, group chats full of praise for Julian without saying a word. I wanted to ask if he trusted me enough to carry the weight with me. But instead I said something softer. Did you think I'd be angry? He looked down, thumb brushing over my knuckles. Number, I thought you'd feel betrayed. That I kept quiet to protect myself. I didn't want to add more distance between you and your family. I thought staying silent was the kinder thing. I stared at him. Silence never protected me, Daniel. It just made me easier to erase. His jaw tightened slightly. Not in anger, in guilt. I'm sorry. I nodded once. It wasn't forgiveness yet, just acknowledgement. Back in the villa, I stood barefoot at the edge of the infinity pool, staring at the reflection of the moon on the surface. I remembered the way my mother had laughed when Julian made a toast at our last Thanksgiving, how my father clapped him on the back like he'd always belonged. I remembered the way I had sat there, wineglass untouched, smiling with tight lips while everyone talked about how lucky Olivia was. How brilliant Julian was. How this wedding was going to be the event of the year. And now I stood an ocean away with only the sound of cicadas and my own thoughts. I whispered into the night. I saw it. I saw it coming. And they made me feel crazy for it. Daniel came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. You weren't crazy. You were the only one paying attention. I leaned back into him, letting the warmth of his chest press against my spine. So what now? Now he kissed the side of my temple. Now we stay here. We breathe. We wait. And maybe when the noise starts back up again, we'll decide whether to listen or let it pass us by. I didn't answer right away. The waves kept crashing in the distance, soft but certain. Like truth refusing to be ignored. That night, the air in the villa felt warmer than usual, thick with the scent of salt and jasmine. I had cracked the sliding door open just enough to hear the ocean and feel the breeze, but not enough to let the bugs in. The sheets beneath me were cool, the ceiling fans spinning in a slow rhythm, and Daniel was already breathing deep beside me. Still, I couldn't sleep. It started around midnight. The first buzz of my phone was subtle, almost forgettable. Then it came again. And again. The sound felt louder in the quiet, like a drip echoing through a cave. Daniel stirred and reached for the phone on my nightstand before I could move. He sat up slowly, screen casting a dull glow across his chest. Your mom, he said quietly. Then after a pause, Chloe. And Aunt Rachel, I think. He didn't read them aloud, just handed me the phone without a word. I hesitated before taking it. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't want to open them, but I already knew the rhythm of these messages. My mother's would be layered in politeness and shame. Chloe's would try to sound casual. And Rachel's would ask if I was okay in that tone that really meant, what did you do now? I unlocked the screen. The first message was timestamped 12:07 a.m. We didn't mean to hurt you, honey. Please call us when you can. Your father is very upset. Then Chloe. Hey, can we talk? Then Aunt Rachel. Just heard what happened. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. Maybe we can all clear things up before more people hear the wrong version. The wrong version. I let the phone fall face down onto the blanket. Daniel leaned on one elbow. You don't have to say anything. I know. But still I reached for my notes app. I started typing. I'm okay. I needed space. I hope Olivia had a beautiful day. I paused. My fingers hovered. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I backspaced the sentence until it was gone. Then I deleted the whole thing. Closed the app. Put the phone back on the nightstand. Daniel watched me without speaking. I laid back down and stared at the ceiling. Why does it still feel like I owe them something? Because that's what they trained you to feel. That your worth is in how well you hold everything together. How quickly you forgive. How quietly you disappear. I didn't respond. He was right, but hearing it out loud made the ache sharper. He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. You're not their keeper, Mads. You're not the one who broke it. You don't have to fix it. I let my eyes close. The buzzing started again. More messages. More silence. By the third night in Antigua, the rhythm had changed. My body was beginning to relax in a way it hadn't in years. I didn't startle at every sound. I didn't reach for my phone first thing in the morning. I let Daniel order breakfast without needing to approve the choice. I sat on the patio in his t-shirt legs curled up beneath me watching the sea move. Still the phone buzzed again. This time he didn't even check it. Just placed his hand gently over mine. You can turn it off. I can, I whispered. I didn't. Instead, I opened the messaging app, scrolled through everything and archived every thread. Not deleted. Just set aside. Like closing a drawer I no longer needed to search through. We went for a walk after lunch. The sun was high but softened by a veil of passing clouds. The sand was warm but not hot. I could feel each grain between my toes grounding me. Daniel carried our sandals in one hand and reached for mine with the other. You feel different today, he said softly. Lighter, lighter, he agreed. But also like you finally put something down. I smiled faintly, kicking at a line of seafoam. They still haven't admitted anything you know. Not one word about the wedding fund. Not one word about Olivia's behavior, just noise. He stopped walking and turned toward me. What do you think they want? I shrugged. To say they tried. To make it about me being dramatic again. To flip it back into some story where I'm the one who made everything hard. Then let them write their story. And you don't have to be in it. His words hung there soft and firm. That night, I sat at the vanity brushing out my hair when another message lit up the screen. From Chloe. Can we at least talk? I didn't open it. Instead, I looked at my own reflection. Not the makeup. Not the polished version. Just me. Eyes a little tired, lips pressed in something between sorrow and strength. I turned the phone over again, and I whispered into the quiet room. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. The first alert came not from my phone, but from Daniel's brass. A soft chime around 6 in the morning. I barely stirred, still tangled in sheets and half asleep, but I saw the glow on his face as he sat up, brow furrowed. He said nothing, at first only stared. Then he reached over, handed me the phone. Julian's name was everywhere. Obsidian Capital under SEC investigation for fraud allegations. That was the headline, but the text was worse. Terms like false valuation, investor misrepresentation, unauthorized shell transfers, and insider tips jumped off the screen in harsh black and white. The article was already being picked up by national outlets. The company's accounts were reportedly frozen. Julian hadn't commented yet. Daniel looked at me, his voice careful. This wasn't Reddit gossip anymore. This was federal. I sat up slowly, pulling the covers around me. The sea breeze pushed through the open glass doors. For a second, I thought about closing them. But I didn't. He opened his laptop, pulled up an email from Chloe marked urgent. She wrote that something strange had happened the night of the rehearsal dinner. One of Julian's old college friends, now a finance guy in Austin, got tipsy and started telling a story that sounded like a confession in disguise. He'd said loud enough for at least 3 people to hear that Obsidian was on the edge last year. Apparently, it took some creative reshuffling and an anonymous investor bailout to keep them from sinking. Chloe had overheard every word. So had Olivia. Chloe said she saw Olivia drag Julian into the wine cellar after the last guest left. She wasn't yelling, just asking. Was it true? Was the prenup still valid? Was the house they just closed on in both their names? Julian snapped. Shouted that she was paranoid. That this is what happens when people without vision try to ask questions they don't understand. Then he threw a wine glass against the floor. And Olivia walked out. Alone. She left the mansion, took a rideshare to my parents' house, and locked herself in the old guest room. That was 3 days ago. She hadn't spoken to Julian since. I reached for my phone wondering if she'd messaged me. She hadn't. But someone else had. My mother. The message was short, almost clinical. Please do not engage with the press. We need to protect the family's image. It's important to stay neutral. Neutral. As if our family name were a stock price she didn't want to see drop. I turned the phone toward Daniel. He read it, handed it back without a word. A second later, another message came through. This time from my Aunt Linda. Then from Chloe's mom. Then my father. They all said variations of the same thing. Let's stay calm. Don't say anything. This will pass if we keep quiet. No one asked how I was doing. No one mentioned Olivia. Only my reputation. Their embarrassment. The way people were now looking at our last name with raised eyebrows and sideways glances. I dropped the phone onto the bed and reached for my tablet. I opened the Notes app and began typing. You told me I was overreacting. You said I was jealous. That I didn't want Olivia to be happy. That Julian was complex, not deceptive. I told you something felt wrong. I begged you to look closer. But you looked at me instead. With pity, with judgment, with silence. You didn't want truth, you wanted peace. Even if it was fake. Now it's real. Now the whole world sees it. I paused. Then typed one last line. Don't worry, I won't say a word. I never needed to. I stared at the screen for a moment before closing the app and setting the tablet down. I didn't save the note. I didn't need to. The truth didn't require backup. Daniel poured me coffee without saying a word, then sat beside me. The wind rustled the curtains. Far below, a couple was walking barefoot along the beach laughing. Their laughter didn't reach our balcony, but I watched their silhouettes. By mid-afternoon, Julian was trending on every social media platform. Obsidian's website had gone offline. Olivia still hadn't made a public statement, but Chloe messaged again. She said Olivia was refusing all contact with Julian and was considering moving back home permanently, at least until things settled. That same day, my mother called. I let it ring out. She tried again. This time, she left a voicemail. Madison, you need to be careful. Whatever's happening between them, it's not our place to stir things up. This family has always held its head high. Please don't jeopardize that. Olivia is fragile right now. Don't add fuel to the fire. I played the message twice. Not because I needed to hear it, but because I needed to be certain. She wasn't worried about Olivia's safety. She was worried about the photos. The donors. The next fundraiser. That night, I dreamed about sandcastles. Grand ones, delicate towers and bridges and arched gates. They looked perfect from far away, but when the tide came in, none of them held. Not one. And somehow I wasn't sad. I stood back and watched as the water rose higher. As the foam slipped in and pulled the foundations apart, no one screamed. No one tried to save it. Maybe they knew somewhere deep down it was always meant to fall. The night air in Antigua clung to my skin like silk warmed by sunlight. Daniel and I sat on the veranda, each of us holding a glass of wine, listening to the sounds of waves brushing the shore and distant music drifting from another villa. I hadn't spoken much since the message from my mother. My mind kept circling the same memory, one I hadn't touched in years. I told him quietly, like confessing a dream, how I was 13 the first time I realized I wasn't seen the same way Olivia was. We were both in the school play. I had a lead role. Olivia forgot her lines in the chorus and cried in front of the whole auditorium. I remember how my mother rushed backstage after holding Olivia like a broken bird, brushing past me without a word. I had done well. I was even complimented by the principal. But no one brought me flowers. No one even clapped extra hard. I was expected to shine. Olivia was praised for simply surviving it. Daniel didn't interrupt. He just let me speak. It felt unfamiliar and terrifying to unravel all that history out loud. He waited until I fell quiet, then reached over and placed his hand gently over mine. Being strong doesn't mean you have to carry everyone. He said it simply, like it was obvious. It made me want to cry again. Later that evening, I told him something I hadn't planned to. It came out like a secret escaping before I could catch it. 6 months ago, I had been asked to review a potential funding deal through my firm. Obsidian Capital was one of the interested investors. Julian's name was buried on page 12 of the pitch deck. I recognized it immediately. Something about the way he was described didn't sit right. I flagged the proposal, documented my concerns, and ultimately declined to sign off. It hadn't felt monumental at the time. Just instinct. A whisper in the back of my head that said no. But now, seeing the unraveling scandals, the half-truths emerging into daylight, I understood how important that hesitation might have been. Daniel leaned forward, brows raised. "Do you still have a copy of that file?" I nodded. It was in my cloud storage, buried under project folders and past due diligence reports. I hadn't looked at it since. But the thought of it now felt different, like holding a spark in your hand before the storm breaks. "You might have more power in this than you think," he said. I stared out at the dark ocean beyond us, the black water hiding the coral reefs and stingrays underneath. Power wasn't something I ever felt I had around my family. Around Olivia. Around my parents' unspoken expectations. I was the responsible one. The sturdy one. The quiet storm. My childhood had been a series of small sacrifices applauded only when done silently. I helped Olivia with her math homework, even though she called me boring. I lent her my favorite sweater for her first date, which she never returned. I kept secrets for our mother. I kept peace for our father. I swallowed resentment like vitamins and wore duty like perfume. And still, when I expressed concern about Julian months before this scandal, my parents called it jealousy. My mother told me I needed to work on being happy for my sister. That her happiness was part of our family's strength. My father reminded me that being skeptical wasn't the same as being smart. That I should try trusting people more. I had smiled through that conversation and cried in the car alone. Now, with the truth crawling out of the cracks, I wondered if they remembered those words. If they had the capacity to feel remorse. Daniel refilled my glass, but I only held it. I wasn't ready to toast to anything yet. "Do you think Olivia believed him all the way?" I asked. "I think she believed what she needed to believe," he said. "That's how some people survive." I thought about that. About the stories we tell ourselves to keep the facade intact. Maybe Olivia had told herself Julian was misunderstood. Ambitious, but loyal. Maybe she wanted so badly to be loved, to be envied, to be chosen, that she ignored the cracks in his narrative. Maybe she still would if the entire thing hadn't started to collapse. The silence stretched, but it didn't feel empty. I got up and walked barefoot across the stone floor of the villa, stopping at the wide-open window that looked out to the sea. The wind smelled like salt and frangipani. In the distance, lightning flickered like a pulse across the sky. Daniel came up behind me, resting his chin on my shoulder. "What do you want to do with that document?" I didn't know yet. Part of me wanted to email it anonymously to the press. Another part wanted to send it to my parents with a single line, "Still think I was overreacting." But deeper still, the part I hadn't fully faced wanted something quieter. Not revenge. Not a spectacle. Just to be seen as someone who wasn't bitter or jealous or dramatic. Someone who was right all along. I turned to Daniel, unsure of my own answer. "Let me think about it," I said. "Take your time. Just know you don't have to carry their denial anymore." I smiled softly. The waves were louder now, crashing closer. The tide was rising, but I didn't feel like running from it. For the first time in years, I felt like I was choosing myself. Under the orange hush of a Caribbean sunset, I sat cross-legged on the wooden deck outside our villa facing the water. The breeze brushed gently over my arms, warm and salted, and the sound of the tide filled the silence between my thoughts. I tried to focus on my breath in and out, slow and steady. The waves moved like they had for centuries, unaware and uninterested in human failures. I had told myself this trip was for healing, but I had barely touched the hurt. I hadn't really been alone with my own heart in years. But here there was no noise to hide behind. No boardroom calls, no Olivia stomping through the apartment in tears. No parents steering conversations into guilt-laced traps. Just me. My eyes closed slowly and I saw her face again. Olivia. Not screaming, not smug, just blank. The day they told me I was no longer part of the wedding, I expected rage or shame or at least hesitation. But she looked at me like I was a wall she didn't have to explain herself to. Like I had been removed and that was that. What lingered wasn't anger, it was emptiness. I opened my eyes and stood up, brushing sand off my legs. My journal sat on the table near the lounge chairs, half covered by a towel. I picked it up, flipped to a clean page, and wrote slowly. Forgiveness is setting yourself free. It's not about reopening what tried to kill you. It's not about rebuilding, it's about release. I paused, pen in midair. Forgiveness is not a reunion. It's a boundary. I underlined the last sentence. Inside, Daniel was making tea. He looked over as I walked in, his eyes landing softly on me like they always did when he sensed something stirring inside me. Good timing, he said, handing me a mug. Ginger chamomile. I took it and let the steam rise into my face. Did you ever feel like you were never allowed to be angry? I asked. He gave a soft huff, sat beside me. Not allowed, no. Encouraged not to be. Different things, same trap. I nodded. I've been thinking about Olivia, and not in a bitter way. Just trying to understand if there was ever a version of her that loved me for real. Daniel tilted his head. Maybe. But love gets warped when people are raised to perform instead of connect. You were a role. She was a role. It was never a relationship between equals. I didn't respond. He was right. I sipped the tea slowly. That night while he slept, I couldn't. My mind felt restless, not in a frantic way, but in a clearing kind of way. Like space was opening up for something I hadn't made room for before. I reached for my phone to set a meditation track and saw the notification. An email from my former company. Subject: SEC inquiry, request for clarification. I sat up. The message was short but direct. Obsidian Capital was under active investigation. Several contracts were being reviewed for discrepancies in investor disclosure. My name had appeared on an unsigned draft that dated back nearly 6 months. They wanted to know if I'd be willing to provide any background or insight on why I chose not to sign. I reread it twice. And I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel dread. I felt relief. Daniel stirred as I walked out to the patio again. His voice was sleepy low. Everything okay? I held up the phone. They're looking into it. SEC. The contract I refused to sign, it's part of the file now. He sat up straighter. Are you being dragged into it? I shook my head. They're asking for insight. That's all. I haven't been accused of anything. He walked out toward me, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. Are you going to respond? I was quiet. I think I already did. When I said no. When I walked away. I think the truth can handle itself now. Daniel didn't argue. He just looked at me and there was pride in his eyes. You don't owe them a thing. Not the firm. Not your family. Not Olivia. You held the line. It wasn't easy, I said. They made sure of that. Yeah, but you still did it. I leaned into him, the warmth of his body anchoring me. For so long, I thought silence meant weakness. That saying nothing made me complicit. But this feels different. This feels like peace. He kissed the top of my head. That's because it is. The next morning, I wrote back to the legal counsel with a simple statement confirming my prior concerns and my decision not to participate in the investment, citing ethical discomfort. I offered to speak if they needed clarification, but made it clear I had never been involved beyond that point. It felt like signing something sacred. Like putting a period at the end of a sentence I had been forced to carry for far too long. When I hit send, I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I just exhaled. And that was enough. The suitcase lay half-zipped on the bed linen dress folded on top, the sea breeze teasing its hem through the open patio door. Our last morning in Antigua. Daniel was out on a walk, letting me have space. I needed it. I sat cross-legged on the balcony, phone in hand, the cursor blinking in my messages app like it was daring me to move. I hadn't turned it back on since the night of the news about Julian. But now it felt like silence had run its course. I scrolled through the backlog. Missed calls. Voicemails. A text from Mom last night that simply read, "Call me. Please." I hit the dial button before I could talk myself out of it. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. Not cold, just frayed. "Madison, I was hoping you would call." I didn't say anything right away. The ocean crashed behind me, steady as a heartbeat. She cleared her throat. "Olivia is. She's not doing well. She hasn't left the house since everything happened. She keeps asking for you." I let the silence hang there, not out of cruelty, but because I didn't know how to fill it anymore. "Mom, she erased me from her life." "You all did." Her voice cracked. "I know. And I was wrong. We were wrong. I want my daughters to talk again." I almost asked her which daughters she meant, but I stopped myself. She continued. "Olivia wants to speak to you. If you're willing." I could have said no. Maybe I had every reason to. But something in me, older than the resentment, deeper than the hurt, said yes. Later that afternoon, I sat at the edge of the bed, laptop propped on a pillow. Daniel sat nearby, quiet but present, his hand resting lightly over mine. Olivia's face appeared on the screen. Her eyes were swollen, nose red. She looked smaller somehow, even on the wide screen. "Hey," she said softly. "Hi." She bit her lip. "I didn't think you'd agree to this. Neither did I." Silence again. Then a breath. "You were right about Julian. About everything. I just didn't want to believe it. It was easier to think you were jealous than admit I'd chosen someone who could do all that." I looked at her, trying to see the girl I grew up with instead of the stranger who sat next to Julian that day. The sister who once helped me sew glitter stars on a prom dress. The one who cried when I left for college, even though she pretended she was fine. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I don't even think I deserve that. I miss you. And I hate that I only realized how much when everything else started falling apart." I swallowed hard. "I don't want you to fall, Olivia. I never did. I just didn't want to be the one always catching you while no one caught me." She nodded. "I know. And I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to." She looked down, then up again, eyes glassy. "You don't have to come back or talk to me again after this. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. And I'm scared. I don't know how to fix any of it." I took a long breath. You don't fix things by pretending they didn't happen, or by making someone else carry the shame. I carried it for all of us for too long. Her lip trembled. "So what now?" "Now I don't know. I'm not ready to jump back into a sisterhood we never really had, but I'm also not interested in revenge." I paused, then added, "I don't want to be the girl erased from the frame anymore. That's all." Olivia nodded, tears streaming now, but she didn't wipe them. She just let them fall. "That's fair." Daniel squeezed my hand gently, a grounding presence. After we ended the call, I just sat there watching the sea darken under the shifting clouds. Daniel turned to me, smiling softly. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen you do." I shook my head. I didn't yell. I didn't even say half the things I could have. "Exactly. You stood your ground. That's strength." I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. "It's strange," I whispered. I thought if she ever apologized, I'd feel this rush of vindication. Like a victory. And now I just feel still. Like I laid something down that I've been carrying for way too long. Daniel kissed the side of my head. You don't need them to tell your story anymore. You're writing a new one. I nodded, eyes misty. And for the first time, it's in my own voice. The cold hit me the moment we stepped out of the airport in Portland. It wasn't harsh, just different. The Caribbean breeze had loosened something in me, and Oregon's gray skies felt like stepping back into a room I had once been locked inside. Only this time I held the key. Daniel reached for my hand as we walked toward the pickup line. He didn't say anything, but I could feel the quiet question in his touch. I squeezed his hand once, a signal. I'm okay, or at least I'm choosing to be. The house looked the same. The trees in front were still bare from winter, the porch light flickering like it always did when the wind picked up. My parents' car sat in the driveway, and for a second I thought about asking the driver to keep going. But then I remembered what I told Olivia. I didn't want to be erased. And sometimes not disappearing meant showing up even when it was hard. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. Her smile was too quick, too practiced, like she had rehearsed it in the mirror. Madison, come in. It's cold out. Inside, the living room looked untouched. Same framed family photos on the mantel, same beige throw blanket folded over the couch. I noticed the photo from Olivia's engagement party was still there. I didn't comment. Dad came around the corner. His hair had thinned more than I remembered. He walked toward me with slow steps, like he was giving me time to flinch. I'm glad you're home, Maddie. I didn't correct him. I just nodded. Dinner was already set. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Comfort food, but no one looked comfortable. Daniel sat beside me, his presence grounding. Across the table, Olivia sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't look up much, just kept pushing food around her plate. I wondered if she had even touched her fork. For a long time we ate in silence, broken only by the clink of utensils and the soft hum of the heater. Dad cleared his throat. I guess I'll go first. He put down his fork, looking straight at me. I should have spoken up. Years ago. I let things happen because it was easier not to cause waves. But easy doesn't mean right, and I'm sorry for standing still when I should have stood beside you. I looked at him, not with anger, but with the kind of sadness that comes when someone you once admired admits they weren't who you needed. Thank you for saying that, I said. Mom chimed in then. Her voice was thin, brittle. I thought Olivia would be okay. I didn't think she needed as much as she did. I thought, you'd be fine, Madison. You always were. I set my fork down, wiping my mouth with the cloth napkin. I was fine because I had to be. That doesn't mean I was okay. And maybe I still won't be for a while. But I'm not carrying it all anymore. I'm not the fixer, not the buffer, not the one who absorbs everything to keep the peace. Olivia looked up then. Her eyes didn't dart away this time. She looked right at me. No tears, no excuses, just watching. Listening. Mom opened her mouth like she wanted to respond, then closed it again. I think she finally understood that I wasn't asking for a performance. After dinner, Daniel offered to help with dishes, but I shook my head and stood grabbing my coat. I needed air. I walked toward the door, but before I could step out, I felt Olivia behind me. I turned, expecting her to pass by. But she stopped. I want to talk, she said softly. Not now. But sometime, soon. I searched her face. There was no apology in her words this time, just a quiet admission that something still needed to be said. Something that didn't belong at a dinner table with mashed potatoes and stale apologies. Okay, I replied. Just let me know when. She gave a small nod and stepped back, letting me pass. Outside, the air was sharp against my cheeks. I zipped my coat, tucked my hands into my pockets, and breathed in the scent of pine and cold pavement. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated, but I didn't feel invisible either. Daniel joined me a few minutes later, slipping his arm around my shoulders. That went better than I expected, he said. Better doesn't mean perfect, number, but it means progress. I leaned into him as we walked back to the car. The night sky was clouded, no stars visible. But I knew they were there, hidden behind the layers. Waiting. The first session was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at the Portland Healing Collective, a restored craftsman house turned therapy center nestled between two cafes and a yoga studio. The kind of place where the scent of chamomile lingered in the air and quiet music filtered through the halls like a whisper. I arrived first. Always early, always prepared. A habit born from years of waiting for others to catch up emotionally or otherwise. I sat in the corner of the small waiting room, folding my hands together as I watched the second hand loop the clock. Daniel squeezed my shoulder gently before finding his own seat a few feet away. He wasn't required to be there, but he wanted to be. He said sometimes healing needed a witness, someone who could remember how far you'd come when you couldn't see it yourself. When Olivia walked in, her face was bare, no makeup, no pretense. She gave me a quiet nod and sat down across from me. Our parents entered next. My mother had her usual scarf looped around her neck like armor. My father looked aged, as if the last few months had carved something hollow inside him. The therapist, Dr. Elena Ruiz, greeted us with a calm presence and warm eyes. She invited us into the room, motioning to a semicircle of chairs arranged around a small coffee table. A pitcher of water and a box of tissues stood between us like a peace offering. No one spoke for the first few minutes. The silence felt less like tension and more like hesitation, like standing at the edge of cold water not knowing how deep it went. Then Olivia cleared her throat. I used to think being good meant pleasing everyone, she said, eyes fixed on the floor. If Mom was happy, if Julian loved me, if people clapped at the right times, I thought that was enough. I didn't let right and wrong distract me. I couldn't afford to. Her voice wobbled, but she kept going. I thought you were strong, Madison. Too strong to need anything. But I see now that I made you carry everything so I could pretend I was weightless. I didn't expect the tears that filled my eyes. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even relieved. I was just sad. Sad for the years we both spent performing versions of ourselves that weren't real. Our mother shifted in her seat. Her hands, always perfectly manicured, gripped the edge of her armrest. We didn't know, she said quietly. We truly didn't. You were always so competent, Madison. You never asked for anything. That doesn't mean I didn't need it. I said, more tired than bitter. I needed a place. Not a pedestal. Not a task. Just a place where I didn't have to earn my way into belonging. Dad's eyes glistened. He nodded slowly. You were our foundation, he murmured. I should have been that for you, Doctor. Ruiz let the silence settle like freshly fallen snow. Then she spoke gently, guiding the session toward deeper questions. Patterns, expectations, generational dynamics. At some point, my mother admitted something I never thought I'd hear. I modeled strength as silence, she said, voice shaking. That was how I survived. But I see now how much I confused resilience with repression. And I passed that down to both of you. Olivia reached for a tissue, then looked at me. I envied you, she said. Your clarity, your confidence. But I see now that it wasn't confidence, it was structure. A wall to keep from breaking. I nodded. That wall protected me, but it also kept me from asking for comfort. And kept all of you from thinking I ever needed it. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No breakthrough sobs or arms thrown around each other, just honesty. And in that honesty, something softened. We didn't solve everything. We didn't even touch every wound. But we named the shape of it. And that mattered. When the session ended, I stepped out into the hallway, drained and light all at once. Daniel was there, leaning against the doorframe, watching with quiet alertness. How are you? He asked. I exhaled slowly, like I just came out of a cave. We walked to the car together, and just as we reached the curb, Olivia jogged up behind us. Wait, she said. Her eyes were red, but her expression was more open than I'd seen in months. Maybe years. She turned to Daniel. I used to think men like you didn't exist. That kindness was just a stepping stone before control. But I see the way you look at her. The way you never interrupt, never diminish. I want to learn that. I want to be that. Daniel smiled gently. It's not magic, he said. It's just paying attention. Olivia turned back to me. I'm sorry for everything, for letting you get erased, for not noticing when you started fading. I paused, then reached out and touched her hand lightly. I'm not fading anymore. Later that evening, I sat on the porch of my apartment with a blanket wrapped around my legs and a cup of tea cooling beside me. The sky had cleared stars sharp against the velvet dark. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "Thank you for showing up today. I know we have work to do, but I'm ready now." Then another from Dad. "Your strength raised us. We're learning to return the favor." I looked at the screen, then set it face down beside me. For years, I wanted them to change so I could heal. But tonight, for the first time, I realized I could heal regardless. The light from the street lamp pooled onto the steps. Daniel came out, draped a second blanket around my shoulders, and sat beside me without a word. We watched the stars in silence. And for the first time, I felt like one of them. Not the brightest, not the loudest, but no longer hidden behind clouds, just quietly, finally seen. The grocery bags were already unpacked, the dining table set, and the scent of roasted rosemary turkey drifted from the kitchen as I stepped back to look around my apartment. It was the first time I had ever hosted Thanksgiving. Not just cooked or contributed, but truly hosted. My name was on the invitation. The guest list was mine, the seating chart was mine. Daniel stood at the stove, carefully basting the turkey with a quiet focus that somehow made the entire apartment feel warmer. He wore the apron Chloe had given him last Christmas, the one with the cartoon pumpkin that said feast mode. Every time he moved, the fabric swayed like it had finally found its place. I turned to the living room just in time to see Chloe and Maya step through the door, arms full of flowers and wine. "We brought sunflowers." Chloe grinned, because they always look toward the light. "Like you." Maya elbowed her and added, "And Pinot Noir, because no family dinner is complete without a little fermented honesty." I laughed and hugged them both. The kind of laugh that felt like it belonged here, not borrowed or polite. Not long after, the knock at the door was slower, hesitant. I opened it to see Olivia holding a pie tin, her fingers smudged with cinnamon. Behind her were our parents carrying a casserole dish and a bottle of sparkling cider. "Homemade apple pie," Olivia said, her voice quiet but steady. "First time I've ever made one without help." I took the pie, stepped aside, and let them in. No formal welcome. No speeches, just space. Dinner was easy, uncomplicated. We passed dishes, clinked glasses, and made jokes about how Daniel should quit software and open a restaurant. No one mentioned the past. No one offered explanations or apologies. The silence between us wasn't weighted anymore. It simply rested. Olivia complimented Maya's cranberry sauce. My mom asked Chloe about her nonprofit's latest project. My dad helped Daniel carve the turkey with the kind of coordination only two perfectionists could achieve. And I sat at the head of the table. Not at the far end, not near the kitchen, not scribbled in as an afterthought. There, between old roots and new branches, I didn't feel like a guest at my own life. After dessert, we moved into the living room. The pie was gone. The wine bottle empty. My mom leaned back on the couch, her hand resting gently on Olivia's. My dad sat beside Daniel, discussing hiking trails near Mount Hood. Chloe and Maya flipped through a photo book I'd left out on the coffee table. Then Olivia turned to me. "Can I say something?" Everyone quieted. "I used to think the world owed me a spotlight," she said. "I chased applause like it could fill me. But that spotlight came with shadows. And I cast mine on you, Maddie. I see that now." "You don't owe me anything," I replied, "but thank you." She nodded, then looked at Daniel. "I'm learning what healthy looks like, what real love sounds like. And it doesn't echo. It holds." Daniel gave her a small smile, then looked at me. We sat in silence for a moment. Not awkward, just full. Then I stood. "I want to tell a story," I said. Everyone turned to listen. Not long ago, I was told I wasn't welcome at my own sister's wedding. So I bought a plane ticket. Not to escape, but to choose joy. I went to the Caribbean with the man I love, and while the wedding unraveled, so did everything that had been false in our family. And what was true? It stayed. No one interrupted. "I lost a seat at someone else's table," I continued. "But I built my own. And you're all sitting at it now." The air shifted, not heavy, not dramatic, just real. My mom reached over and placed her hand on mine. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Later, after everyone had gone and the dishes were drying on the rack, I curled up on the couch with Daniel the pie tin empty beside us. You did it, he whispered. I didn't do it alone. No, he said. But you were the first to stop pretending. The window reflected our shadows against the soft lamp glow. Two figures side by side. Not a spotlight, not a stage. Just life. And for the first time, my story didn't end in exile or silence. It ended with a full table. With names remembered. With seats offered not earned. I didn't get revenge. I got restoration. And maybe in the end, that's the real victory. Have you ever had to draw a line to protect yourself, to rebuild something healthier, even if it meant walking away from what broke you? If you have, share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your way back home.